Hello, everyone. It is one of your hosts for this episode, Kodey Stauffer.
I'm the other one, Simon Voyanos, a.k.a. Coach V.
And Gino as well.
And this episode, like we do for the tackle football season in the fall, we also are going to have a reaction episode for women's NAIA flag football here, especially reacting to the season, the tournament, and just kind of how some of our awards shook out and everything there. So this will be a pretty brief episode, but just want to make sure that we give a tip of the cap to all of these squads who had very interesting seasons. It was one of the ones that I think had the most potential top dogs at multiple given points in the season, and so that made it pretty fun here. And we'll talk about the regular season and kind of how our power rankings from the initial get-go stood up to that. But first, we're going to react to the tournament and just some of the results here. I'm going to go ahead and set the stage with the pool play results. Just do a quick rundown of all of these scores. For the full recaps, be sure to listen to episode 359, as well as check us out on Tik Tok, where we have highlights from all of those games. But anyways, on Wednesday here out in Atlanta, Baker defeated Midland 27-12 in Pool A here. In the B pool, like kind of set up here, Warner beat Milligan 21-6. Kaiser defeated Midland in the A pool 43-6. Weber beat Milligan 34-6 in the B pool. The C pool then started with St. Thomas beating Campbellsville 54-6. The B pool concluded with Warner earning a bye, beating Weber 13-12. The D pool started with Kansas Wesleyan defeating Reinhardt 36-6. Kaiser then concluded the A pool with an undefeated record, beating Baker 52-6. In the C pool, Ottawa beat Campbellsville 47-0. In the D pool, Thomas defeated Reinhardt 71-0. And at the conclusion of the C pool, Ottawa beat St. Thomas 20-6. And in the conclusion of the D pool, Thomas defeated Kansas Wesleyan here. And so that set the stage for an A bracket and a B bracket. And so in the A bracket, Ottawa was the number 1 seed and had a bye on that Thursday. And the number 2 seed was Thomas, the Nighthawks here. The 3 seed was Kaiser facing off against 6-seeded St. Thomas University. And then Weber versus Warner, part 5 for this season, it felt like, was taking place, and the winner of that would play Ottawa. That was the A bracket, and in the B bracket, it was Kansas Wesleyan and Baker at the 1 and 2 seeds respectively. And in the 3 versus 6 game was, I believe, oh man, I'm starting to space on this. The 3 versus 6 seed.
Was it not Milligan versus Reinhardt?
Yes. Okay. 3 seed Milligan versus 6 seed Reinhardt, and then the 4 and 5 seeds was Midland and Campbellsville here. And so yeah, we're gonna just kind of talk through what our bracket predictions were, and then talk about what actually happened here. And I'll let you guys duke it out here over who talks about their bracket first.
I was about to say, Gino, since you were there, you should go, because I feel like I still haven't been able to watch all the games in full. I'm just throwing that out there because end of the year school. So you might as well, since you were there live.
Yeah, so for my bracket here in the A bracket, in the Weber versus Warner game, I actually had Weber winning that one. Really, what that came down to was I really just thought Weber was due for one, especially since they had seen Warner several times already this season. So I really just felt like they were just finally gonna get over that hump and get that win. I was clearly wrong there. But in the Kaiser St. Thomas game, I had Kaiser beating St. Thomas. I just feel like Kaiser, just the way they were looking on the first day, I did not see them losing this early on in the tournament. And then in Ottawa versus Weber, in the next round, I had Ottawa taking down Weber. Obviously, Weber didn't make it that far. And then I had Thomas over Kaiser in the semifinal. And this is just like with the Weber-Warner situation where I kind of just felt like Thomas had lost 2 very close games to Kaiser, and they just seemed to be due for one. And I know they were hungry for that national championship, especially after that heartbreaker last year. I was obviously wrong there. And then I had Thomas beating Ottawa in the national tournament. Kind of the same reasoning there. I think that I just had in mind that they were going to get that revenge game. But, that obviously didn't work out. And then in the B bracket, or the silver bracket, I had Midland over Campbellsville. I just think Campbellsville is not quite there yet. And Midland is just, kind of in that top part of the KCAC, more established program. So I had them winning that one. And then I had Milligan over Reinhardt. Reinhardt had 2 key players get kicked out of the tournament for getting into a little bit of a fight before the game against, I believe it was, I forget who they were playing. Oh, it was Kansas Wesleyan. Before they played Kansas Wesleyan, a couple of their players got kicked out. 2 key players at that, so I did not see them beating Milligan here. And then I had Kansas Wesleyan over Midland in the semis. And then I had Baker beating Milligan. Milligan really surprised me there. I think Kodey and Simon could vouch for that. Talking around to other coaches, they were definitely a little bit shocked. But Milligan just came out and they were playing their best football of the entire season. So to see them beat a very good and well-coached Baker team was quite surprising. And then I had Kansas Wesleyan beating Baker in the silver bracket championship. I just think Kansas Wesleyan is 1 or 2 steps ahead of these other silver bracket teams. They just have the QB, obviously, very good defense. And, I just really didn't see them losing that one. Simon, what do you got?
Yeah, no, for sure. So like I said, wasn't at this thing, but I got a pretty good idea of where everyone was at here. I'll start with the gold bracket here. It basically went almost exactly how I thought it would go. I had Warner beating Weber, Kaiser beating St. Thomas, Ottawa beating Warner, and then Kaiser beating Thomas, and Kaiser playing Ottawa in the national championship, but I had Kaiser winning. I felt like this was their year based on the earlier game this season. I don't know. It seemed a lot like they were that much better than them, but it kind of it looks a lot like now that Ottawa was maybe pulling back a little bit in that regular season game, which could be very deceiving. So there is that there. But, that was the only game I got wrong in that gold bracket. In the silver bracket, I had Midland beating Campbellsville, Milligan beating Reinhardt, KW beating Midland, Baker beating Milligan, and then in that championship, it would be KW versus Baker, where I had Kansas Wesleyan being the silver bracket champs again. I mean, let's just be honest, Kansas Wesleyan probably should have been in the gold bracket. I think, realistically, there wasn't really a team here that was going to beat them in this silver bracket, just knowing where they're at right now and all the talent they have and all the experience as well. Like, I don't know. I would have been shocked, to say the least, if KW lost. And it wasn't close. That championship wasn't close. Good on Milligan, obviously, for winning, though, and proving me wrong and getting to the championship, beating Baker. I said this kind of throughout the season. I felt like Milligan always played down to talent and whatnot, but I felt like this was probably the first time they played up to talent, which is good because I think they're super talented. They have a lot of players. They've just struggled in those big games, and that was a big game. Unfortunately, though, even if they played at their best against KW, I don't think it would have been enough against that squad. So there you go there. Not too many surprises. I guess the only real huge surprise in this entire tournament was Ottawa beating Kaiser. Is that fair to say, Kodey and Gino?
Well, I'm just going to run through mine real quick. The B bracket, I had the exact same predictions as everyone else here, so getting proved wrong by Milligan. And, watching their very first game against Warner, I shouldn't have been as surprised because I think that they played very, very well in that game and that the score wasn't even indicative of how close that game actually was. And seeing that Warner ended up being a top 4 team should have let me know that Milligan had potential to pull off an upset. I was just very high on Baker and obviously, Coach of the Year recipient Willie Perez was a lot to do with that. So that was my surprise in the B bracket. But I do think that, for the A bracket, I had Warner beating Weber, Kaiser beating STU, Ottawa beating Warner. But then I got it wrong. I had Thomas beating Kaiser. Kind of similar to Gino here. I just thought, 2 scores of 6-0. It's not like Thomas, I don't think, to lose all 3 of these matchups against Kaiser. But I think that day off kind of hurt them, honestly. And they just didn't come in super focused. And the lights just got a little too bright, I think, during some pivotal moments during that game. The game was, I think, within reach. But you can't drop a couple of touchdowns and interceptions and expect a team like Kaiser to let you hang around for a super long time. So there's that. And then I had Ottawa beating Thomas. I just, I played it safe, I would say, with my predictions, just thinking, this team, this squad has been here before many times, and something that I thought about, that I talked to the Sours about the year prior, and something that kind of crossed my mind was that they never lost to the same team twice in a season, and or anybody that they lost to, they would eventually beat. And so that was kind of my thoughts, is that they lost to Thomas during that Reinhardt Invitational, they lost to STU, they lost to Kaiser, and that they would respond with answers, and that they had Osborne, who I think is one of the biggest X factors in all of women's flag football, even though the stat sheet doesn't show it. So, but I will say that the result became a lot more surprising after I saw what Kaiser did to STU in that quarterfinal, and seeing how close the score was of the STU Ottawa game that Gino got to watch. I definitely thought, well, damn, if Kaiser can put up 44 on St. Thomas and kind of just cruise here, it kind of seemed like they were destined to just cruise to a title here, and it was anything but. As this final score, Kaiser just had a few missed opportunities here, and ultimately, the Ottawa defense just kind of locked them up, and it was a bit surprising. And then, Osborne, I always accidentally say burn, Osborne burnt opponents this tournament, and especially Kaiser here. There was just no answers, similar to the year before where she had a huge impact in the Thomas game. And that was my biggest takeaway from the national championship, was just, it's so hard to play against Osborne. There's not really many linebackers that match up super well with her. As far as a shadow blocker goes, she buys the quarterback a ton of time to pick you apart in other ways, and she holds on just long enough and leaks out. And her and Carrera have such a good, almost telepathic connection that it is just so hard to defend. And that ended up being too much as they closed out this, senior set here with their 4th championship in 4 years, which was something that Katie Sowers also said was one of her goals during day 1 of games. And that's what came to fruition. And I think it was surprising looking at the whole season. And yeah, I do think it was surprising, but I think that they beat a good Warner team, a Warner team that I think was actually at its best during that semifinal matchup, and they beat that Kaiser team that just looked dominant in their prior 2 games in pretty classic Ottawa fashion. Gino, I'll let you hit up here what your raw reactions were as well, and then Coach V, we can circle back to you as well for your overall statements and reactions to our reactions as well.
Yeah, I gotta agree. Talking to Coach Sowers, just hearing her thoughts, and just really the players we talked to, they hold a certain confidence in themselves that is just quite clear, and it makes you want to believe in them. And like we were talking to Coach Sowers when she said that they had never lost to the same team twice in the same season. I forget who else said that. It might have been Madison Carrera when we interviewed her, but it just comes to show that this team makes just the right adjustments, and we really saw that in this one. And just how stacked they are, man. Like, you had freshmen like Talia McInnes stepping in, making huge plays. I mean, as a 5'10 DB, I mean, that's just unbelievable. And then you also had Mandolin Scalisi stepping in at center in this game, which was something I didn't really expect much. But she did a great job. She's like running downhill. She's really dangerous. And like you said with Addison Osborne, her acceleration and just her dynamic playmaking ability on top of her ability to shadow block is just something that you don't see every day. It's something that's just so clear how much of an impact she has, and just really, really impressive to watch. And, you know, in watching the game, I think Kaiser, they just got outplayed, man. I think they have the talent. They obviously have the talent, and that's going to stay. But as far as that game goes, it really just came down to a couple miscues. And then, like Kodey said, the Ottawa defense just locked them up. Cynthia Holmes was just so dynamic, so great in the secondary, and it's really hard to do much against that. And then you had Madison Carrera, just her footwork, her just ability to dance around in the pocket and make plays and make throws on the run is just so awesome to watch. And yeah, they were just the better team that day. That's what I'd have to say about that one.
Yeah, I mean, agreed there. I did say that was probably the only matchup that was a little surprising there. It's not surprising that Ottawa won. I think it's more surprising that they won by that much. This was a game that I was able to watch a pretty good amount of, actually, and I just felt like Kaiser didn't capitalize when they needed to. And it was just an off game. Ottawa, on the other hand, had a very clean game, and, you know, I mean, they just whooped him, is what it was. And obviously that's a lot of credit to that squad. We've known how talented they are. You know, we ranked them number 1 in the preseason, and I'm going to bring back this quote just so that it's out there still. But, you know, I did say throughout this season when talking in our power rankings that I wouldn't feel comfortable counting out Ottawa until they're eliminated and their season's over. And, you know, they weren't eliminated when they lost those games in the middle of the regular season. They were just regular season games. And, you know, a lot of credit to that squad and the coaching staff, the Sauer sisters over there, keeping this team right here and, you know, taking care of business when it mattered, which is ultimately all that matters, winning those championships and whatnot. You could live with 4 or 5 regular season losses as long as you get a championship, especially the 4th one, and it being as historic as it is on this NAIA level. I mean, that's absolutely big time, you know, for Ottawa. And so just a lot of credit to Ottawa. Shout out them. You know, this is a great dynasty here that's still going on, and we'll talk about the future and stuff later, but, you know, this is definitely, you still probably can't count out Ottawa moving forward, is all I'm saying there. But altogether, seemed like a pretty good tournament, like a fun time y'all had over there in Atlanta, though, right?
Yeah, no, it was a good time. It was great to see all the players, and we appreciate all the players who took time to introduce themselves to us, as well as take time for interviews and whatnot, and all the coaches that we got to talk to and break bread with. And, you know, it was a good time. And, you know, I think that obviously, you know, it's always fun to get out there and, you know, get some props and meet parents and folks like that. And also fun to have a little friendly banter here on some disagreements and whatnot, which I'm excited to talk about our awards, which we'll be having graphics out for in the coming weeks. So just keep your eyes peeled for that, as well as our continued reposting of highlights and interviews from that tournament that will be all over our TikTok feed at Playmakers Corner and will be reposted to our Instagram. Lots of content that we got, lots of friends that we made. And, you know, before we talk about kind of what our end of the regular season awards kind of looked like here, I just wanted to take some time to shout out the all-tournament team from this past tournament here, with the wide receivers being Anna Vincenzini from Warner here, Alyssa Linkus out of Ottawa. The blocker was Addison Orsborn out of Ottawa as well. Quarterback, Jasmine Roden, an offensive athlete of Ashley Clam. And then on the defensive side of the football, Tashumba Washington was at safety here. And then at defensive back, they recognized Riley Bolser. So shout out Riley. I know that you weren't there to see that. Giselle Jones was also all-tournament defensive back. The rusher was Emma Wagenman here. And athlete on the defensive side of the ball was Kennedy Foster. I think if I'm just going to give my quick raw reaction here watching through the games, I do think that Wagenman was super dominant throughout the tournament and even beat like a double team in the Midland game. Gino got a great highlight of that, so be sure to find that on TikTok. But that was pretty dominant, and yeah, she had a great tournament. She had a touchdown against St. Thomas on a lateral from Kennedy Foster. So Kennedy Foster forcing turnovers and a very sure flag puller. Probably some of her best flag pulling of her career happened in this tournament, I would say. And yeah, I agree with the rest of these just fine. Gino, what was your reaction to this all-tournament team here? And, you know, especially having watched these players at different points. And then we'll be able to move to our awards section here in reaction.
Yeah, you know, I honestly think they nailed it. I don't really have any disagreements. It's really clear, like for Tashumba Washington example, she has a massive impact for that St. Thomas defense. There's no way they make it to the A bracket without her. She even got hurt in that Ottawa game. She got roughed up pretty bad on a pass breakup, but came back in and still had a dominant impact. Just kind of shows her resilience there. Alyssa Linkus, she was just barely missed out on the MVP for that for the national championship game. Like we even talked to someone like it was kind of a toss-up between her and Madison Carrera, but Alyssa Linkus, shout out her for just absolutely dominating and getting that fourth ring. Ashley Clam, completely, like, she had a head-top touchdown on the first drive of the tournament, just to give you an example of just how dynamic she is, and she's going to be a problem for years to come. I think everyone knows that, though. But yeah, I think they really nailed it, and yeah.
And Madison Carrera took home all-tournament MVP as well as our Playmaker of the Week. I mean, she just played her best football, not only of the season, but arguably of her career here. So, you know, it was very fun to watch that and catch all that. So, but moving into, you know, I talked about our Playmaker of the Week, and now I'd like to talk about some of our awards here, just because, you know, we had some of a say in this, obviously, with 3 of the votes here, but it was 6 total votes here. And so, you know, we obviously had the episode where we announced it, but this is kind of our time to react to it. Simon, you were the showrunner on that award show here. And as the person who is reading some of these results firsthand and reading them out loud, were there any that kind of surprised you from our media poll and or fan polls?
I don't think so. I mean, there are some close ones for sure here. I don't want to take up all the reactions because I obviously gave all my reactions on that episode, which is, I mean, it's pretty short, so you could go ahead and check that out. That's episode 357 here. I think most of these made sense. This was a very, like, all these players and athletes and candidates, you know, they're all pretty well deserving here. There were, I mean, I had my opinions, but there are a couple that I felt like finalists that should have been in there as a finalist that weren't, and that was, I mean, that's pretty much it. But other than that, everyone was pretty well deserving. Do you want me just, like, real quick to run down through the winners, and then I'll actually let you and Gino react to this? Because, I mean, everyone here, like, there are some tiebreakers that were very dramatic and whatnot, but there wasn't anything that was, like, crazy, you know what I mean?
Yeah, please do. That's good to give all the listeners a reminder, as well as Gino and myself, and have some raw reactions here. Gino, after Simon reads those out, I'll let you take a crack at it first.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go down the line, and then Gino, I'll throw it to you here. But defensive back of the year was Ashley Clam. The tie, or the vote was actually tied at 3-3, but obviously that fan vote is the tiebreaker there. That goes for all of these, by the way. Linebacker of the year went to Kaiser's Sidney Woodman. Rusher of the year went to Thomas's Caitlin Herb, 5-1, by the way. Also, just throwing this out there, I feel like Rusher of the year has been an underclassman every season since we've done this award, so that's kind of interesting. Utility Player of the Year went to Brianna Hernandez Silva with a vote of 3-1, which was kind of crazy there. Wide Receiver of the Year went to Anna Vincenzini with a winning vote of 4-2. Quarterback of the Year was Jasmine Roden. She won with a 3-1 vote. Coach of the Year went to Willie Perez. That was 4 votes for him, and then 1-1 going to other coaches. Freshman of the Year, that's our only unanimous vote here. It went to Kaiser's Ashley Clam, 6-0. I think that was probably the least surprising one, to be honest with you there. So there you go. Defensive Playmaker of the Year went to Sidney Woodman. It was a 3-3 vote, but she got the tiebreaker, so that was big time for her. Offensive Playmaker of the Year went to Ashley Clam, another 3-3 vote. Ashley Clam out of Kaiser, by the way, her winning that fan vote. And then MVP went to Anna Vincenzini. For the first time ever, there was a 3-way tie, but she won the fan vote by a pretty significant margin here with 63.2% of the votes. 745 votes on that one, actually, which is one of our most voted on polls ever, I want to say. So, with that being said, Gino, what do you think about these award results here? And yeah.
Yeah, man, I think, like what you said, Simon, there's definitely a couple players I felt like could have made our finalists, but didn't. But it is what it is. I think we had a very, very, very solid list of players here. I think my biggest surprise was the Vincenzini vote for MVP. I think it was it was very divisive. 2 votes between her, Chihiro Iwata, and Jasmine Roden. I voted for Jasmine Roden. But I think all 3 of those girls were very deserving. Vincenzini just having such a monstrous impact on that Warner squad at slot receiver and defensive back. It's really kind of, you watch the game and she's the one that stands out the most. I think we could all agree there. She was absolutely deserving. But yeah, that one did catch me by surprise a little bit. And then also another one that kind of surprised me was Offensive Player of the Year. I think I really thought that Madison Carrera was a lock there. I think with her 60-plus touchdowns, that just felt like a really, really massive impact. But obviously Ashley Clam is such a dog, so I have no problem with her getting the win there. But yeah, like I said, I personally had Madison Carrera getting the win there. I think it was really cool that Willie Perez got that vote for Coach of the Year. Just a very humble guy. Me and Kodey got to chat with him a bit, and I think his approach to the game is something that's really refreshing. And it just kind of comes to show that women's flag football has some seriously great minds coming to the game, and that it's just in such a good place right now. And I really think that Baker is going to be a popular place for people to transfer to and for top recruits to go to. So I think the KCAC should be watching out for them. But yeah, I think everything else I kind of agree with everything else. Quarterback of the year, I think it was really just a toss-up between Roden and Iwata. I think when Kodey kind of nailed it on his explanation, just how when you consider what Roden has at wide receiver versus what Kansas Wesleyan and Chihiro Iwata has at wide receiver, and still Iwata was still able to put up prime Tom Brady numbers, is really special to see. And so for her to win, or for her to still be in that mix, it was really cool. But yeah, I think Jasmine Roden winning that makes a lot of sense. I think, despite her size, she's a very dynamic playmaker, and very tough to bring down. And just she's able to spread the ball around too to Brenna Ramirez, Adriana Rodriguez, Ashley Clam, Kennedy Foster, Brianna Hernandez Silva. Like, all those girls are getting a lot of yards, a lot of touches, and I think that comes to show just how great Jasmine Rodet is with her vision and finding the open receiver. But yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents there.
My biggest reaction from these polls was just the fans. Want to give a shout out to the fans here who really showed out. I mean, if we compare these voting numbers to last year's, it's night and day. They actually had a very significant role here, especially shout out to the Kaiser fan section that helped, decide the Ashley Clam defensive back of the year tiebreaker. They were basically the winning vote for quarterback of the year that, had a 2-2-1 tie, and then they were that third breakthrough for Jasmine, and they were also the breakthrough vote / tiebreaker for Cindy Woodman and Ashley Clam. And then in the MVP vote, it was very important. Shout out to our Panama audience here who really showed out on that most valuable playmaker as well as that wide receiver of the year polls. Tons of votes there, tons of reposts. Thank you all so much for reposting that and giving us your opinion. And we figure y'all are a huge part of what our listening is, and so to give y'all a voice means a lot to me, and for y'all to use the voice means even more. So I definitely appreciate that. And shout out to Ashley Clam, as well as one of my biggest reactions, just her winning. I mean, what is this? 1, 2, 3 awards. I mean, that is just a dynamite start, and it's only the beginning. Willie Perez, like you said, very cool dude. It was fun to meet him, and a ton of respect from his former players as well, who approached him throughout the tournament and, had nothing but nice things to say and to catch up with him. So I think that that's a testament to him as well. But yeah, shout out our skill player, Anna Vincenzini, bringing home the MVP. Love to see it. Impact on both sides of the football. And I mean, she lived up to the hype at the tournament as well, basically being unguardable once they were in the red zone, and having very sure hands on the offensive side of the ball and good flag pulling on the other side. So, she was obviously dynamic. And, I mean, all of these players, shout out to all these players who were in our award sessions. And to kind of turn the page a little bit, I want to also just give a shout out to the seniors. I mean, obviously, we've had some graduates here from the past few seasons, but this one is going to be one of the biggest graduating classes. I mean, obviously, you have the women from Ottawa here who've been winning national championships since their freshman year, and they got to run it up and down 4 times and just be a part of a very special class here. This class of 24 is graduating a ton of talent, and I know that the game won't be the same without them, but the game is not the same because of them as well. So I just wanted to make sure to, to give this class of 24 their flowers and their, recognition for their contributions to women's flag football and to NAIA women's flag football. I just wanted to say huge thanks and big ups to y'all, and just give y'all some time to also kind of, I mean, we could talk about all the names for hours, honestly, but, Gino, you obviously only had this one season here to kind of see this greatness, so I kind of want to know your perspective as far as getting robbed out of seeing these women in action a lot more. And then, Simon, I mean, you're really the head honcho when it comes to women's flag football coverage here at the pod for the NAIA level, and have been paying the most attention, so I definitely want to hear what you have to say after Gino on what seeing basically this class was from start to finish.
Yeah, I think ultimately that just the senior class was really special, and I think that's really what made the difference, especially in the national championship. Like for Ottawa, they had a very strong senior class, and like you said, it's tough, like not being able to see them before, but seeing them now, I couldn't imagine like what the growth has been. And I really wish I could have seen them before. But yeah, like you said, Kodey, this was a very, very special senior class, and I'm really sad to see them go. But like you kind of dropped a bar there that that I forget what you said, but it was a bar, whatever you said before. But they
it's not really feeling like a bar right now.
I was about to say.
It was so good I forgot it. It was so good I forgot it.
But I appreciate that.
Yeah. Like you got like Jasmine Roden. She went out with an absolute bang this year. She's, Kaiser kind of moved away from using the 2 QB system so much, and she stepped up in just a massive, massive way. And just players like that, it's really special to see. You also got like Jada Wilson on Kansas Wesleyan, a very special defensive back, and she had her moments at receiver as well. It's tough to see, man.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, like all these women here, they were basically pioneers in this game, and so we all have a lot of respect for them here. And it's been a great couple of years. Honestly, I've been able to cover pretty much all of them for the majority of their career, except for that first year here. But other than that, these are all players that I've had the opportunity to cover for 3 years here, like the Jasmine Rodens, Kennedy Fosters, Madison Carreras, just to name a few. Jasmine Camacho, Alyssa Linkus, as well as I want to shout out Brianna Hernandez Silva as well. For a while, it was Brianna Hernandez Silva, Madison Carrera, and Jasmine Roden as the top 3 quarterbacks in the entire country. And, just top 3 players in the entire country for a really, really long time here. And, they put up their numbers, man. They played some great football out here, made some great memories. All the highlights, too. I wish we had a better highlight compilation that we could put out there, like a career highlight compilation we could put out for each of these seniors, because they all made their mark, and there were a lot of memories out there that, is fortunately covered in a lot of our podcast episodes, which I'm really happy about, just having that all documented, I should say, for forever. And so huge shout out to all those athletes, and they paved the way for this next generation here, which we're already seeing with Ashley Clam and whatnot being as great as they are, Anna Vincent Cini's of the world as well, and so I don't know, it's a little melancholy for sure. It's definitely I don't know if that's actually the right thing to say there. It's a mixed
bittersweet.
Yeah, it's bittersweet. It's a mixed reaction. It's been great covering them. A lot of great memories, but obviously, it can't last forever, right? Got to make room for this next generation, and that's exactly what this group has done. Not only making room for them, but giving them a platform by playing great football and going down in history for those programs. And I don't know exactly how we are going to honor that first group here, but I'd absolutely love to name some of these awards after that first group, because I think that is a very fitting. I know this is the first time I'm bringing up this idea, but Kodey and Gino, what do you think of that potentially here? We still have some conversations, to have about it, but I think I'd really love to remember some of those great players by doing that.
I think that's a wonderful idea. I think that that's how you honor these players. And I think that that is the namesake, or a lot of awards' namesake is from a similar path. And yeah, I actually really love that idea. And I also wanted to take this as a moment to invite any of these seniors who are stepping away from the game to please reach out to us for an interview. We would love to get your college experience documented as well, and share it with the world if you are ever interested. So a little two-piece idea convo here. Meanwhile, Gino just has to react to it. Unless you got a third idea has hit the audacity here, if you got one.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna keep it at 2. Y'all got it, but Simon, I think that is a really fantastic idea, especially when you consider that you guys have been watching these players for the last 4 years and their entire college careers, and just the overall impact that they've had on the game of women's flag football. I think that is just a perfect way to commemorate what they've done for this sport. And also Kodey, I would love to, I would love for some of these players to reach out for an interview just to talk X's and O's, talk about their favorite memories, and just like also give a message to girls that are considering joining the sport. I know we've talked to a lot of players at the tournament about that, but it's always great to hear a new perspective on that as well. So there you go there.
Yeah, I think that those are some awesome ideas here, and I can't wait to further these discussions as well as share these stories as well. And, we did talk about that message, so once again, I will not stop shamelessly plugging these. Interviews are going to be on our TikTok, on our Instagram, and also posted eventually to our YouTube as well, probably in a playlist or in a supercut of all of them, just because they had a lot of good insight during the games, before the games, after the games, as well as just good advice, I think, for some of these younger players as this sport will continue to explode here. And, I think that a lot of these players showed that patience as well throughout the season and weathered a lot and learned a lot here. And so did we about these very teams here. And it's very interesting looking at our preseason power rankings. And obviously our power rankings moved up and down throughout the season. That's what they do. But looking at our preseason power rankings here, and I'm just going to go off of, the collective one. Obviously, we can talk about our individual ones as well. But it was very interesting to see where we landed with these preseason rankings here. And yeah, Simon, you were the king of this power ranking segment. So I want to just kind of pass the floor to you a little bit here on these preseason rankings here, and then I'll basically read off what they were at the end of the year, accounting for the national tournament, and then obviously the bottom 8 teams that didn't quite make the trip will also kind of shout out here. But talk us through this preseason rankings here, and maybe hint a little bit at how differently things ended up as we went down the season.
Yeah, so let me just hop into these preseason rankings. I'm not going to go over the process of this. If you're listening to this episode, you already know what the process of our power rankings are. We all vote, and they get points. So there you go there. But just to go down the line, our preseason rankings went, and this was interesting, I thought. But tied at 19 was Bethel and Graceland. Semi-interesting. 18 was Life, 17 Point, 16 Southwestern, 15 Campbellsville, 14 St. Mary, 13 Baker, which was the highest rated first-year program on this list. 12 Milligan, 11 Kodey, 10 Reinhardt, 9 Midland, 8 Florida Memorial. Tied at 6th was Warner and Weber. 5th was Kansas Wesleyan. 4th was Kaiser, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. 3 was Thomas, 2 was St. Thomas, and at number 1 was Ottawa. You got to remember at this time, Ottawa just acquired, well, I guess a year ago, they acquired Cynthia Holmes here, and that was big time. I think at this point, we all agreed that this was their national championship to lose, and it was pretty much a foregone conclusion that they would eventually win the championship. I think that has pretty much held up the same. They had a little bit of a bumpy ride to get there for sure, but when it comes down to just pure talent and depth, there weren't many teams that could hang with them like that. So there you go there. I don't want to take up everything here, so I'll just mention a couple other teams that were a little interesting here. Kaiser, they literally just lost their head coach like a week before we did this, so there are some questions there, but we all agreed that they could have been easily a 1 or 2 team here. We were all pretty high on Ashley Clam going into her freshman year. We knew what kind of star she was playing for Texas Fury and, Team USA, and she has obviously, lived up to those expectations, but as a team, we just weren't sure about Kaiser, so that was an interesting one. And then we also had Warner at 6th, which was interesting as well. But before I go too much into it here, I think there are a lot of very cool storylines. Kodey, why don't you go ahead and talk about what our final, I think it was our regular season power rankings were. So I want to say this was before either the Sun Conference, before both the Sun Conference and KCAC postseason tournament, right, Kodey?
Yes, so we did it before the conference tournaments, and we did not release more power rankings following the conference tournaments. And so heading into those conference tournaments, we had Kaiser at the 1 spot. Obviously, Sam Harris did just fine as the interim coach, and, definitely squashed any fires that we had concerns about. Thomas was number 2. Ottawa was 3. Warner had dropped to 4 here from prior weeks, sitting at 2 for a pretty long time, but lost a couple of games to some heavyweight opponents here. And then St. Thomas was right up there as well. Ken's Wesleyan 6, because we technically had a tie at 4 with Warner and STU. 7 Weber, 8 Midland, 9 Baker, 10 Southwestern, 11 Milligan, 12 Campbellsville, 13 Reinhardt, 14 Life, 15 Kodey, 16 Point, 17 USM, 18 FMU, 19 Graceland, 20 Bethel. And real quickly, I want to just mention that when talking to the coaches here, in prior years getting to nationals, there was financial assistance from, I want to say, probably the NFL. Not entirely sure here, but there was financial assistance to get these teams to nationals. This year, it was all on the teams themselves. And so if teams were broken down from injury or had financial struggles to get out there, they were probably not going to be there. And it's just the interesting part, and I think that the one that I'm going to notate the most here is that Southwestern here was actually ranked number 10 in our power rankings here. But this team, we talked about it literally every recap that we watched Southwestern, that they had 8 players. So not literally, it was I think 10 total. But still, that is very, very low depth. And a trip like that, I think for that, probably playing it safe, not risking any player injury, especially since they had played so much this season. So that was probably the one that I was the most sad to not see, but I also understood. And then I'll say, interestingly enough, Life University was right next door to the Franklin Gateway Sports Complex, which is where pool play was, and also some B bracket play. So I was a little sad to not see them just because of the proximity, but first year program, I guess you got something going on and you might have to keep the dorm. So I don't know. I definitely think that they should have been there. And then I will say that I was a little sad not to see Kodey there, especially just to say what up to PMC fam and the homegirl, Kenzie Murdoch. Congratulations on all of our graduates who did not make the tournament as well, by the way, especially the likes of Kenzie here, who we covered her film and broke it down in high school and got an interview before her college career, and now hopefully get another one after. I'm going to continue to drive some of these ideas and points here. And then what I will say is that, the final power rankings, if we did one for after the season or just went based off of tournament results, it'd be Ottawa 1, Kaiser 2, and then some mix of Warner, Thomas, Weber, STU, KWU, and then Milligan, Baker, Midland, Reinhardt, Campbellsville would technically, I think, be how that would fall just because they went to nationals here. But I think that for the most part here, our power rankings were pretty close to how the season ended. And heading into nationals, we all talked. We were like, well, it's Ottawa, Kaiser, or Thomas. We thought it was one of those 3 teams specifically that could win a national title. And obviously that was reflected in our brackets as well as heading into it, just kind of how that looked. Gino, I know that I've kind of rambled for a long time. What's it like, especially you, who came in a bit more blind than Simon or I, kind of, looking at your personal preseason rankings and then kind of seeing where they ended up at the end of the year and your reaction post-tournament as well to just this season and the growth or descent that we saw from some programs where we thought they were going to be.
Yeah, I think as a podcast, we kind of knew that the top 7 was going to be any mix of Ottawa, St. Thomas, Kaiser, KWU, Warner, and Weber. That stayed very consistent throughout the year. So no real surprises there, besides Kaiser rising all the way up to 1 despite losing their head coach. I think Warner was a big surprise. Not that they had a successful season, but just the fact they started out the season, 13-0, 14-0, something like that. And just to be such a young team and to be able to do that, despite some questions at QB play, they really, really stepped it up, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They were just a nightmare, and really just a tough team to play. And, honestly, looking at these preseason rankings here, I really thought that, it's with the new programs, there's always questions about the players they're going to have, the depth, things like that. But a lot of these teams were able to overcome that, just like Southwestern, like you said, Kodey, only having 10, 11 players on the roster, but still having those key players that were able to drive their season and still come out here with a successful season despite, maybe not having the greatest KCAC tournament, but it's still a successful season nonetheless, especially as a first-year program. And then you also have other first-year programs like Baker. We all knew Coach Perez was going to have a massive impact on the game, but I don't think any of us really saw just how really deadly that this team is going to be. Their offensive, just their playbook is just so exciting to watch. It's a lot of fun to watch, and I really didn't see them being a top 10 team like they were, but here we are, and I expect them to be a perennial top 9, top 8 team from here. And then you also have teams like, I think we've talked about this, especially towards the end of the year, those like 10 through 12 or 13, those teams were just really, really hard to rank, just because of the inconsistencies. I think from Baker and Midland to Weber and up from there is pretty easy, but then you had just teams that would just come out and win like a great win by a lot, and then they would lose to a team that right after that. So it was just so hard to rank. And another reaction I have is just us having FMU so high up to start the year. Obviously, they had some issues with a few things. I'm not going to get too much into that, but they clearly were not the 8th best team in the country. So just things like that, are just really surprising looking back. And yeah, and also seeing teams like Life, who are a first-year program, but, they didn't have a ton of depth, but their coaching staff really played to that team's strength, and that led to them having a pretty solid ranking to end the year. I believe they were all the way up at 14, which is not bad at all. I think just how many exciting young teams there are, like Reinhardt, Campbellsville, even Milligan, especially after that tournament we just saw. These teams are on the way up, and we're going to have I'm just going to have a lot of fun watching them next year and seeing how everything shakes out.
Yeah. Definitely agreed there. Florida Memorial is its own. I mean, we might as well talk about him, right? I think we all felt like their talent was up there, and I said this in the preseason preview, and you could go ahead and check this out because it's pretty much word for word, but I was really nervous about their coaching hire and the decisions they made over there as far as front office stuff. And I feel like, if anything, this season proved those fears to be real. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen moving forward, but I mean, as far as a talent perspective goes, they're not the 18th most talented team out of 20 in the entire country. Is that fair to say, Kodey?
Oh, it's absolutely fair. I mean, they consistently have had players in conversation for all PMC teams the past few years, and this year it just dwindled down because all of the all of the non-football stuff was kind of getting in the way. Well, I get it happened in the games, but it was not flag football the way that the sport is intended to be played, and it was just a bunch of hogwash, honestly. And it's a real shame for the players who I think are getting cheated out of good opportunities, and a real shame for some of the seniors now who don't get a chance to remedy that. So I really hope that take some notes out of Coach Willie Perez's interview here and establish a culture that is worth something here.
Yeah, for sure. So there you go there. As far as first year programs, I mean, it's always cool seeing some new faces in there, seeing some returning faces. Shout out Milligan. I was really happy that they had a pretty solid season. Their website could use some updating, but they played a lot of games this season, and some of them, were competitive and really exciting. I remember their crazy game against Life was probably game of the year, to be honest with you, and that was pretty hype. And then you had some blowouts here and there, but regardless, they're back and they look like a very healthy program. They've recruited well. I think a year of development for them and all the other young programs will do them a lot of good, but it's just good seeing the sport grow. So shout out all of them, the Bakers, Southwesterns, Milligan, Campbellsville, Reinhardt, Lifes of the world, so love that. And then, as I guess moving on, just final thoughts about these top teams here. Kaiser, Thomas, Ottawa, I think we all knew that they were going to be in some sort of battle for that, so nothing much could really be said more about that, in my opinion. Warner, St. Thomas, Kansas Wesleyan, you could even throw in Weber and Midland as well. We're very interesting teams, all for different reasons. St. Thomas's offense just kind of, I don't know. It just didn't work out, I guess. It looked like there wasn't chemistry, even though they had great chemistry last year. And I feel like they even added an upgrade in Leah Cruz, who I think is super underrated right now. So look out for her next year. So there's that. Kansas Wesleyan, they had a pretty crazy surprise with Chiro Wada over there. She's been big time for them, but it was really, in my opinion, it was on some of those mental mistakes that they made on offense between the drops and stuff like that, which was tough. Weber was Weber. I don't know. I think with Weber, we kind of know what to expect at this point. They're going to be really well coached. They might not have the most talent, but they are always going to be in that hunt. So there you go. And then Warner was interesting. Y'all obviously watched them, in their last games a lot more recently than I did closely as well. But it seems like Kayla Ludwig may be the answer at quarterback. Yes, no, Kodey or Gino?
Kodey, I'll let you take that one there just because you were able to see them play in pool. But I will just say that I was very impressed with how she did, especially on late downs. She had a lot of clutch plays, and I think once they expand that playbook a little bit and once she feels more comfortable throwing over the middle and more deep balls, then yeah, it's going to be scary going forward. But Kodey, I'll let you take it from there.
I remember just watching her poise in the very first game against Milligan. They definitely were a bit conservative in their offensive play calling as it was her first start of the year. But, she just exuded confidence and didn't really have me concerned, from a sideline perspective. Even when she threw a pick, it was not going to be a complete unraveling. We've seen that with a handful of quarterbacks where it's all right, they throw 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and it just becomes like a nightmare. And she never had that about her. She shrugged off mistakes very well. She did a great job of putting the ball where her pass catchers could make a play here. And, I also got a chance to interview her, so go check that out on TikTok as well, about, her moving from a running back role to a wide receiver role to a quarterback role. And it just seems that she's very coachable and she's very selfless. And I think that those are great tools as a quarterback. And then her poise, I think is very, very important because a lot of young quarterbacks do struggle with that, and being able to find that fit was huge. And I think that Ludwig, I mean, they technically played Ottawa the closest point differential wise, and I don't think that with some of the other offenses that Warner rolled out this year, that was going to be the case. But Ludwig was the difference in... I felt like I was watching a whole new Warner team during this tournament, and Ludwig had a lot to do with that, and I think was probably the biggest surprise of the entire tournament as far as an individual player goes, just because, well, there were never any hints that she was going to be starting at quarterback, and so she came in and took care of business, I think, and helped this Warner team probably even overachieve compared to the vibes I was kind of feeling from them from the Sun Conference tournament. And, you know, throughout the season, we obviously, to start the year, they had those big upsets and those big wins against Thomas and St. Thomas to start the year. And then as the year went on, you know, they kept winning and rolling. And then as we got near the end of the season, we started to have our doubts. And, you know, following the Sun Conference, we were definitely skeptical about them heading into Nationals. And, you know, it's amazing how much they shaped up there. And then shout out to Sam Wilson as well from Weber real quick. Just wanted to give her a shout out for all of the work that she has done for this Weber team and has been the mainstay for this squad. And I'm pretty sure she's a senior, if I'm not mistaken. And if
she's
she
not.
is, then, oh, well... Why do I feel like she's been playing for 4 years?
This is her 3rd year. So she is...
Wow.
Yeah. I told you, she's cold.
Sheesh.
Yeah. No, she's tough, dude.
Well, shout out Sam Wilson for coming back then.
Yeah, there you go. I think she's going to be the oldest starting quarterback. Or maybe not, I shouldn't say oldest, but most experienced starting quarterback going into next season, which I think will be really interesting. So there you go there.
Yeah, and is returning some very interesting weapons. Shout out to Riley Bolser here. And shout out Coach Molesky here for giving us a hard time. Being like, hey, where was Riley on the all-PMC teams? Don't worry, Coach. We see the work that she put in. And he's like, come on, she was a volleyball player. Look at her ball out now. So hopefully we get to see some more Bolser action as well from that Weber squad. But yeah, I think that these top teams, we kind of had an idea of who they were. I do think if I'm just talking like a sentence per team, you know, based off of our preseason rankings, Ottawa ended number 1. STU underachieved on offense. Thomas kind of just played their worst game at the wrong time, I think, is probably the easy way to say that. Kaiser, Sam Harris, you know, that's an easy one sentence. K-Dub with Chihiro, that was the truth. Warner, I'd say defense, you know, there. And then obviously Ludwig heading forward. Weber, with the one sentence for Weber is Weber. And yeah, I feel like that kind of, you know, addresses most of these teams. As silly as that sounds, like Simon said, Weber is Weber. We know what Weber's going to bring, and they brought exactly that this season. And, you know, I think that for the rest of these teams, that was kind of my quick rundown to how I feel to describe their season in as brief of words as possible. Would y'all use any different words to describe any of these team seasons, or do you have one word for any of the other teams that I didn't mention, or short phrases for their seasons?
No, I I didn't really have anything more to add. It was a great season. A lot of great teams to talk about. Do want to shout out Michaela Nunez on Midland. You know, that I think she was one of the few vets on that team. You know, few like 2+ year vets on that team, and is also one of the older, you know, players in the entire country, as well as a senior who was part of that first group ever to be pioneers over there. And, you know, Midland, it was pretty rocky over there, their situation, but they were able to put together a pretty okay season. I think going into next year, there's definitely some questions at quarterback and arguably leadership in general, but we'll just have to see what happens there. But other than that, just really excited for next season. And by the way, before I let Gino, react here, do want to mention about Kayla Ludwig. We did her film breakdown, and her sisters, by the way, a really long time ago. Like, she was a sophomore in high school when we did her film breakdown, when we were talking about her predecessor, Devin Silvestri, over at Newsom. Shout out Coach Silvestri over there. And so we know how well they developed their football players over at Newsom. And so it was no surprise that, in my opinion, it was no surprise that Kayla was able to get in there and compete in even the preseason previews. I did say that I kind of expected her to be in that mix. I know she was coming off of an injury, but she could definitely be in that mix for quarterback. And so it was cool seeing her get her chance and make the most out of it. And, they're going to be a really interesting team. But, before we kind of wrap this up and talk about maybe the future here a little bit, Gino, was there anything else you wanted to add on about any of these teams? Since it was your first year covering women's flag football as well.
I don't have too much to add. I think Kodey kind of nailed it for those teams that you said for the one sentence for. I think with Thomas, it's tough. I think that defense is just so deadly. I mean, you don't see any teams holding down Kaiser to 6 points, let alone twice. So it was tough to see them go out the way they did, man. But I'm rooting for them in the future. Ottawa, it's going to be interesting. Obviously, we know that they're going to reload just fine, but I think going into next year, it's going to be really, really interesting to see what they do. Like quarterback, and like you said, they're losing a couple players, Camacho, Linkus. Obviously, they've got a lot of players that are going to step up. Dos Santos was someone that me and Kodey noted that looked very good and had a huge impact, especially as like a 5'10" receiver. Kansas Wesleyan, I think they truly are, I really believe this, they're a number one receiver away from being a top 4 team in the country. I don't know if that's a hot take. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I just think that with how good Chihiro Awada is, and with how I like both Coach Wins. I think they are very humble people in that they can definitely coach a championship team. I really do believe that. So I'm very excited and interested to see what they do in the future. But yeah, that's kind of all I have to add there.
Well, with that being said, as we kind of wrap this thing up, I do have just one quick spontaneous question here at the end before we do it. But, going into next year, it's going to be pretty interesting. You're going to be without a lot of familiar faces. You're going to add, obviously, a good amount of new programs as well. I think even at this point, we don't even know all of the new programs that'll participate for sure next year. It's always a little bit different, but we got some new ones, some exciting ones. And so with that being said, just disregarding those new programs next year, Kodey, Gino, what are 2 programs that you are really excited for going into next season, or players as well? I'll open it up to that.
Yeah, so heading into next season, I am very, very excited to watch Chihiro Awada, and something that kind of really got me even more activated to watch her next season is pointing out that there is a chance that could be the national Japanese team starting quarterback for the Olympics. And thinking about that development and that angle and getting hyped for that gets me super excited. And that's kind of my MO for these players that I'm going to talk about here is, these players that we have a strong chance of seeing at the Olympics. I'm talking an Anna Vincenzini for Panama, and maybe even potentially an Angeline Bunting. But I think that Awada and Vincenzini are huge pillars to players that I'm very much looking forward to see next season. And then as far as programs that I'm excited to see next season, I really like what Southwestern started off with, and with a full roster, I am very excited to see how far that program could potentially go, and hopefully get to see them at a nationals or an invitational, depending on how many teams there are on the NAIA level. So I think that is a great start as far as just like trying to choose some things that are kind of out of the box here. And then I think that the other program that I'll choose, I'll just keep it to 2 apiece for myself, is going to be Ottawa, and see how these younger players step into these now veteran leadership roles, and what that is going to look like for this program that, will still try and quinpeat. They're not going to just roll over and hand out the crown. They're going to reload, and I'm very excited to see how that reload goes and what that means heading into next year. Before I pass it off to Gino, and then after that, Coach V, I will say shout out Coach Joe Schlager. He is a friend of the pod, absolutely. He's going to be the head coach at William Woods University for NAIA Women's Flag, and we got to talk to him a lot on the first day of practice and just kind of see him throughout the tournament, and he had a lot of great insight and, was just doing some scouting as well, and, got to go to that combine, and so shout out him for getting together a program out there. Obviously, shout out to all the new programs that will be there, but shout out to Coach Joe, who spent a lot of time with us this past week in Atlanta, and it was really awesome to meet him and just kind of shoot the breeze. But now I'll pass it off to Gino here.
Yes, I'm not going to, as much as I want to double down on the Southwestern thing, just because I do think they're a very interesting program going forward, I will just add this about them. I think Miranda Dooley and Viviana Solis getting just having a year under their belt and seeing what this team could do with more depth is very exciting. But I will just go ahead and choose 2 teams, one from each conference. I'm going to go ahead and go with Baker. I talked about it before. I think Willie Perez, like I just said about Southwestern, he's got a year under his belt, and we saw what he did with a team made of basically entirely freshmen, and he's going to have players with more experience. He's going to get players that are going to transfer there. He's going to get a lot more recruits. So just really interested to see how they shake things up here in the KCAC, especially against teams like Kansas Wesleyan and Ottawa. Just going to be able to see what they do there. And then over in the Sun Conference, I'm just going to go with Warner, man. I think getting, Kayla Ludwig got some very, very important experience in this tournament. We would have obviously loved to have seen her more often, like maybe in the Sun Conference tournament or something like that. But I think just getting to see her next year leading that offense with Vincent Cini as a junior. You'll have Angeline Bunting, she'll be a sophomore next year. These are, just how deadly this team was with how young they were. I think it's very interesting thinking about what they can do next year after they get all this experience from this year. I really think that they could definitely pull off a Sun Conference championship next year. Especially with if how Kayla Ludwig's impact is going to go, how I think it's going to go, I really think that team can make a lot of noise next year. And I think everyone who's paying attention knows that. But yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents there.
Fair enough. This is definitely pretty tough. I'm really excited about all the teams. I think that's the cop-out answer there. And it's going to sound a little homerish, I guess, but I'm not a homer. But I'm really excited for all the Sun Conference teams. Kaiser, Thomas, St. Thomas, Weber, Reinhardt and Life especially. I think there's going to be a lot of quarterback battles and position battles going on, which I think is very dramatic. And, there's a lot of things that could happen because I don't think you really have a team if you don't have an established quarterback or a quarterback you believe in at the very least. And I think all those teams might have some questions there potentially going into next season, or might have the potential to upset the other one. I'm looking at teams like Life, Reinhardt. Those are two teams who have been very young. You could throw in Point in there as well, but I really like Life out of those three, to be honest with you. They got some nice, good, core players to work with in Kamaya Graves, Altiera Gooch. I think those players, they make up a really good core, along with Jayla Wright as well, by the way. And I think if they could just add a couple more players, that could be a real dangerous team. Same with Reinhardt, just them taking another step forward. But, obviously you have other teams like Kaiser and Thomas and St. Thomas and Weber, who have pretty much been running this conference and, the country outside of Ottawa when it comes to women's flag football, and they're going under some major changes there. And so it'll be really interesting to see how all of those teams respond, to losing their core from last season, or really the last 4 seasons, except for Weber. I mean, they'll be bringing back a lot of players. Thomas will be bringing back some players as well. I think the most out of anybody in the country, I want to say. And so that's definitely going to make for some interesting storylines. But I think altogether, the Sun Conference going into next season is going to be wild. Per usual, right? But it's going to be wild with some new faces going to battle over there. And I think that is definitely making up for some great narratives going into next year. So, yeah. Like I said, cop-out answer. And I admit that. But, it's just great football down south.
Classic Coach V. Nah, I'm just playing. I want to just say I agree with what y'all are looking forward to, and I'm just very excited for the exponential growth of this sport in general, and excited to continue to cover this on the NAIA level, and can't wait for when we get a chance to cover it on the NCAA level at the rate that it's growing. And also just want to put our listeners who are on the national scene, as well as some coaches who listen to us, make sure that you listen to our Colorado high school flag recaps, as we will be talking about that and some of those results and some players, especially because we just got it sanctioned here in Colorado and we were the 11th state. And, I think that plenty more are to follow. And so that makes me excited. And it also makes me excited to see Colorado athletes also get their chance on the next level. Shout out to Leilani as well, who is not only doing her thing at Ottawa, but also doing her thing for the Mile High Blaze as well. So we're very excited to continue to be a part of this rapid growth and, just the broadcasting of women's sports and women's athletes who, are some of the best in the world. And it's really a privilege for us to be able to cover it. And we appreciate everyone who supports us along the way. Fellas, anything else to add on before we wrap this one up?
Nope, not really. We'll see y'all next year is all I gotta say right now. It's been a great season. It's always super refreshing. I think this season especially was super refreshing to be able to cover it. So thank you so much for all the support. Shout out Code Red Coaching too, by the way, for supporting us this season, sponsoring us this season. That was absolutely big time. So there you go there. But I'm already excited for next year. There are some new names that I'm looking at on paper here, and it's going to be really fun to watch just to see how they compete against, some of these established teams. So there you go there. But other than that, thank you for the support and looking forward to next season.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank all of our listeners for checking us out this year and for all the support. Also want to thank you too, Kodey and Simon, for bringing me along and just showing me this really awesome sport. I've had such a great time covering it, and I'm really looking forward to what happens in the future and just for the sport in general, just how big it's getting. Like Kodey said, the exponential growth is super exciting. And I couldn't be more excited to be a part of it at this point. Thank you guys.
Yeah, shout out to Coach V, obviously, for being the main showrunner and editor, for crushing it this year, as well as killing the game in his track season as a coach as well. I know he won't say it, but that team did some historic stuff this year. So shout out to Coach V, who can do it all, and shout out Gino, who was able to accompany me on this trip and also cover a lot of the games as well. Very privileged to work with these guys. And to our fans, thank you so much for listening. Please continue to share us and share this wonderful sport with everyone that you know, as it's on the rise and there's no avoiding it as well. And thank you, obviously, to all the coaches for your insight and for your willingness to let us know, to reach out to y'all for information on tournaments, games, and game film. I know that Coach Mims out there, it was fun getting to meet you and formally introduce, and obviously sent me huddle game film from one of the games as well. And so that was cool for us to be able to recap that game and just provide those resources, and obviously the players, to the pioneers, to the athletes, to some of the GOATs of this generation, who are just while being historic, are just setting the stage as well for many, many more athletes to come after them. And you can't do it without the people that paved the way. So thank you all to all those. Shout out to the class of 2024. Congratulations or congratulations, for all of those. Shout out to all of our award winners and just everybody. Huge thank you. And also, shout out Kodey, Code Red Coaching. He has been a real one since day one here. And sorry we couldn't link up out there in Atlanta. Hope you're feeling better and not as under the weather, as I also got attacked by something in that Atlanta era. I don't know what it was, but it has been a fun season. I was really sad when we were in like the fourth quarter of the championship game. I was like, damn, the NAIA flag season's over, and that sucks. Kind of knowing what we'll be turning our attention towards. But for all of our future content, be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms. That's Playmakers Corner on Facebook, at Playmakers Corner on Instagram, at Playmaker Corner on Twitter/X, Playmakers Corner on TikTok, where we are going to have a ton of that content coming out as well. And as looking ahead to the future, some season previews are kind of on the horizon, and interview clips and stuff like that. So, be sure to stay tuned for all of that, as well as listening to all of our episodes or watching them on YouTube. Playmakers Corner, go ahead and subscribe for notifications on there, or follow us, like us, turn on notifications, whatever you got to do anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, so on, so forth. Thank you all so much for the support. Continue to find us, share us, and everything like that. I have been one of your co-hosts for this episode, Kodey Stoffer.
I'm the other one, Coach V.
And Gino.
Signing off. Peace.
Boom.